If we have got to a stage where my mother, who's 90, is now able to pick through the crap in the Irish Times and on RTE, that means that if nobody else has acquired the black sunglasses or taken the red pill, that my 90-year-old mother has. So this is a positive achievement, and despite the distress that a lot of people are absolutely justifiably suffering under the psychic attack, this World War III that has been inflicted on so many different countries across the world, including Ireland, there are many positive things that are coming out of it. It may be hard at this stage for many people to see those positive things, and that's understandable because this is an attack. When you are attacked, the first thing that you have to do is to deal with it, and it's easier for some of us than others. But one of the positive things that has come out of it is that people who had hitherto been quite conservative and normie in their outlook, like my mum, have changed completely. And my mother, absolutely refuses to wear a mask. She refuses to allow my father to wear a mask, and she totally supports me for not wearing a mask. And this leads on now to the central topic of this video, which is the issue of conscientious objection. The concept of conscientious objector dates back well over 100 years, probably longer than the Great War, but it came into the foreground publicly. It entered the mainstream, if you like, via the Great War, because the Great War was the first major war of attrition in which the participants came to question why this was happening, and people were coming back from the front line to Great Britain and other parts of Europe, but primarily Great Britain, and they were questioning the political motives behind what they were being forced to do. So being a conscientious objector in Great Britain during the Great War was a very dangerous thing. What a lot of people didn't know, though, and the mainstream media wasn't telling them, was that there was no conscription universally across the United Kingdom. The only conscription was in Britain. There was never any conscription anywhere on the island of Ireland, which those of us who know our basic history know until 1922 was all part of the UK. And indeed, it was the prospect of the introduction of conscription in the island of Ireland that was a major driver behind what would eventually lead to the creation of the Irish Free State in 1922. We're not told a lot of that, but if you go back to 1915 or 1916, there wasn't a universal enthusiasm to break out of the UK back then. It took a lot of different jolts to do it. I could do another video, a much longer video, on the nature of the people who started the Easter Rising in Easter 1916, because I used to, until quite recently, buy into the narrative that they were just terrorists and wackos and lulas. And certainly I'm very much opposed to political violence, and I always will be opposed to political violence. But at the same time, those men of 1916 were not wackos. They were not lulas. And when one looks at the sacrifice that they made, it was incredible. It was incredible, and it's moving, and it moves me these days now as I've gotten older to realise exactly what those men in 1916 were thinking about. But conscientious objection arose as a concept probably before the Great War, but arose in the Great War. It's happening today, because I've analysed, speaking for myself, that my refusal to wear a mask, which I'm legitimately claiming it, I'm claiming it in good faith, under the might cause extreme distress indemnity, that's just one reason. But conscientious objection is what is driving me also. From the outset of the lie that masks were compulsory in supermarkets, it's a lie, it's a damned lie. But from the outset of that damned lie, I was and remain absolutely crystal clear that this is something that I am absolutely happy to go to jail for. That's not equivocal, that's not something that I'm boasting about. I would be happy to be imprisoned for my refusal to wear a mask. So that is, by its definition, conscientious objection. I'm not causing protests, I'm not assaulting people, I'm not insulting Gardaí and live streaming it on the internet. I'm not doing any of those things, but my protest is that I am not wearing a mask, and I reserve the right to publicise it on social media, as I have done. Moreover, I want to hear from other people who are also refusing to wear a mask, because whether they've analysed it as far as I managed to do today, I only reached this position today, they're conscientious objectors as well. And during the Great War, the people who didn't want to fight, what they didn't realise was that all they had to do was come over to Ireland. Nobody told them that shit during the Great War. Take themselves, take their families, get up to Larne, get a boat over. Get somebody to sail you over from Cairnryan or Stranraer. Sorry, I was thinking of Larne is in Northern Ireland. But you want to get the fuck out of Britain and you're stuck in there and it's 1914 and there's conscription. Pack your bags and hit the road. Get walking. And if the coppers stop you, just say that, you know, you're crippled with emphysema or something and you're going to visit a relative or something, and get walking, get going, go to Wales, go to Scotland. If you get over to Holyhead, you could probably get onto the steam packet ship that was going between Holyhead and Dún Laoghaire at the time. You want to go further, get up to Scotland. Make your way, walk, hike. People have done it. It depends on how committed you are to this. And that's how committed I am to not wearing a mask, because it is these days the same thing. It's conscription. It's a form, in a way, of conscription. Okay, we're not being conscripted to go and die in the trenches of Flanders, but if you leave aside the nature of what you're being, the actual practical, physical, day-to-day reality of what you're being required to do, it is exactly the same thing. It is a form of conscription. We have to construe that those men who were killed, absolutely killed like cattle in the First World War, in the Great War as it was called. When I was a history teacher, I would always say to kids, please don't call it World War I unless you're putting it in the context of World War II. They didn't end it in 1918 and say, well, let's take a wee break for a while. So until the Second World War broke out, what we now refer to as the First World War was always referred to as the Great War. And if you're referring to it in its own right and not in the context of the Second World War, it's still more accurate to refer to it just as the Great War. But hey, I did a degree in history, and so I know shit. Anyway, I also was an English teacher, and I was appalled. 11 years I was a teacher, appalled. I was appalled at the laziness of the other teachers and at the shite that the kids are having indoctrinated into them. It's worse now than ever, worse than ever. I could do another post on educating at home. Oh, yeah, I could do another post on educating at home because, again, that's a form of conscientious objection. You have the right in Ireland to educate your children at home. The reason for that is just like the Burke family, the brilliant Burke family from Mayo, who were laughed at by the mainstream and laughed at by the liberals and laughed at by the wokerati. But my goodness, they wiped the eye of the Minister for Education when he doesn't need his fucking arse wiped. They wiped the eye of the Minister for Education, did the Burke family. Oh, they and what they also did was they dealt a very, very serious and important and significant blow in favour of those who are asserting their constitutional right to educate at home. But why would you want to educate your child at home? Well, you would want to educate them at home because there are features of the mainstream education system that you don't want. If I had children, I don't have children, I would absolutely insist on educating them at home as a teacher, quite aside from being a parent. And one of the things, the only thing kids need to know is how to read, write and count. They don't need anything else. If they can read to a very high level, if they can write to a very high level, and if they can count to a very high level, then they can educate themselves. I remember teaching in a school in Dublin. And I actually I liked the boys I taught there. It was a secondary school. It was a very rough working class part of Dublin, an all-boys secondary school. But, you're a new teacher in the school. They're going to give you a bit of slagging for the first day or so. Actually, I found within a few days it was grand because they realised... And working class kids appreciate good teachers who work hard to teach them well. They don't like wokeness. Wokeness, and Thomas Sheridan has commented on this. The Marxists who propagate wokeness do not like the working class people. They despise them. Working class people have an ethos, whether they're immigrants to the working class areas of Dublin or whether they're white people who've lived here for many generations. Working class people respect hard work. Where does the word working in working class come from? And I remember with those boys very quickly, they began to respect my competence and my ability to deliver good results, particularly good exam results. But I remember quite close to the start of my job there, one boy said, "The way you speak so, the way you speak so, how would you describe it?" And I said, "Correct." I said, "I would say the language I used is what you would call correct English." And that one went down, and the boys laughed at that, in fairness to them, and it stuck in their minds. And I found that these sixth-year boys and the fifth-years, they were always keen to get me to help with their vocabulary and to explain concepts to them and to explain words to them. I loved explaining things to a class. Hey, you've only got 40 minutes with them. You have to spend 10 minutes explaining shit to them. You've only another 30 minutes to get through. It's brilliant. I don't know why so many teachers... When I went to secondary school, half of my teachers are mentally ill and the rest of them are fucking incompetent. I don't know, did you prefer being in the class with the teacher who was mentally ill? I think I did, because the teachers who were incompetent or angry at their own incompetence. Many of them were both mentally ill and incompetent. But I never ever minded setting aside my plan for a class to take 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes to explain a concept. Because if they understand that concept, that means you can always catch up with the scheduled work later. We're getting back to conscientious objection. I am a conscientious objector. I am conscientiously objecting to being forced to wear a mask. I will claim that as supplementary to any defence if I am prosecuted for my refusal to wear a mask. So far, 3 weeks have gone, and I haven't spoken to a copper about it, and I've been given no hassle by anybody in authority because they know somebody who's going to stand up to their bullshit. I have been hassled in the first week by normies, but they've all become too demoralised and depressed now, going in to buy the aspirins for their suicides. So they're not. It's been 2 weeks now since any one of those normie civilians around Sutton, those nice golfy and tennis club people from Sutton, have given me any hassle about my conscientious objection to wearing a mask. So it's all cool for now.